The dust-laden rope cut into Eleanor Harper's raw wrists as she struggled against her bindings, the scorching Arizona sun beating down mercilessly on her exposed neck. 3 days she'd been tied to this post outside Rattlesnake Gulch, a crude ransom note nailed above her head while passers-by averted their eyes, too afraid of the Blackwater Gang to offer help. Her throat burned with thirst, and despair was settling in when she heard the approaching hoofbeats that would change everything. It was 1878, and the Arizona Territory was still wild and untamed. Eleanor, 22 years old and orphaned 6 months prior, had journeyed west from Boston to claim her late uncle's modest ranch near Tucson. What she hadn't known was that her uncle's land contained something valuable, a freshwater spring that the notorious Blackwater Gang coveted for their cattle operations. The rider approached slowly, his face shadowed beneath a worn Stetson. Eleanor squinted through swollen, sun-burned eyelids as he dismounted, his spurs jingling softly against the packed earth. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "Please," she croaked, her voice barely audible. "Water." The stranger's eyes, sharp and blue as desert sky, took in her condition with a calculating gaze. Without a word, he unhooked a canteen from his saddle and approached. Eleanor flinched as he raised it to her cracked lips, allowing cool water to trickle into her parched mouth. "The Blackwater boys did this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Eleanor nodded weakly. "They want my uncle's land, say they'll kill me if they don't get the deed by week's end." The man's jaw tightened as he assessed the crude wooden post she was bound to. With practiced efficiency, he drew a knife from his belt and cut through her bindings. Eleanor collapsed forward, her legs too weak to support her weight after days of standing. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "No one owns you but me," he growled, lifting her onto his horse before mounting behind her. Eleanor stiffened despite her exhaustion. "I don't belong to anyone, sir." A small smile touched his lips. "Name's Lucas Vance, and that was meant for the Blackwater boys, not you, Miss Harper." "Eleanor Harper," she replied, relaxing slightly against his chest as they rode away from her prison. "Why help me? Those men will come after you now." Lucas's laugh held no humor. "I've been waiting 3 years to give the Blackwaters what they deserve. You just gave me a reason." He took her to a small cabin nestled against red rock formations several miles outside of town. It was spare but clean, with a stone fireplace and simple furnishings. As he helped her inside, Eleanor noticed the badge pinned to his vest that had been hidden beneath his duster. "You're a lawman," she observed, sinking gratefully into a chair. "U.S. Marshal," Lucas confirmed, setting about heating water and gathering supplies. "Been tracking the Blackwater Gang since they murdered a family in Colorado. They've been careful, but kidnapping you in broad daylight." "That was sloppy. They're getting desperate." Eleanor watched as he prepared a basin of warm water and set it before her with a clean cloth. His hands were calloused but gentle as he demonstrated how to clean the rope burns on her wrists. "I can manage," she said, taking the cloth from him. Their fingers brushed, and despite her exhaustion, Eleanor felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. Lucas nodded and moved to the hearth to prepare a simple meal. "You mentioned your uncle's land. What's so special about it that the Blackwaters would risk a kidnapping?" Eleanor dabbed at her raw skin, wincing. "There's a spring, underground water source that never runs dry, even in the worst droughts. My uncle Jacob wrote to me about it before he died, said it was the reason he chose that particular plot." Lucas whistled low. "Water rights are worth killing for in these parts. The Blackwaters run cattle on the adjacent property. A drought's coming, they can feel it. Without that spring, they stand to lose everything." "So they decided to take what isn't theirs," Eleanor said bitterly. "Story of the West, isn't it?" "Parts of it," Lucas agreed, stirring a pot of beans. "But there's more to the frontier than thieves and killers, Miss Harper. There's good people trying to build something that lasts." Eleanor studied him, the way his shoulders carried tension, how his eyes constantly scanned the windows. "Is that what you're doing, Marshal Vance, building something that lasts?" Something flickered across his face. "I'm making sure others can." He placed a bowl of beans and a slice of cornbread before her, Eat, you'll need your strength." That night, Eleanor slept in Lucas's bed while he kept watch from a chair by the window, rifle across his lap. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the ropes cutting into her skin, saw the sneering faces of her captors as they tied her to that post 3 days ago. "You'll fetch a good price," one had laughed. "Either your land or your pretty neck." She woke with a strangled cry before dawn, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Lucas was instantly at her side, a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're safe," he said simply. Eleanor drew a shaky breath. "For now, but they won't stop, will they?" Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, his profile illuminated by moonlight filtering through the window. "No, but neither will I." "Why risk your life for a stranger?" she asked. He was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. 3 years ago, the Blackwaters raided a settlement in Colorado. Small place just starting out, they wanted the cattle, but things went wrong. By the time it was over, 12 people were dead, among them my sister and her husband. Eleanor's heart twisted. "I'm sorry." Their boy survived. "My nephew, he's back east with my parents now." Lucas's hands clenched into fists. "I swore I'd bring the men responsible to justice. And have you brought any of them to justice?" Lucas's mouth curved in a grim smile. 3 so far, 4 more to go, including Silas Blackwater himself. Eleanor reached out impulsively, covering his fist with her hand. "Then I'll help you." His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "This isn't your fight." "They made it mine when they tied me to that post," she countered. "Besides, I have nowhere else to go. My uncle's ranch is the only home I have left, and I can't claim it while they're watching it." Lucas studied her face, seeming to weigh her determination. "It'll be dangerous." "Life is dangerous, Marshal Vance. At least this danger has purpose." A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine one she'd seen. It transformed his features, softening the hard lines around his eyes. "Lucas," he corrected. "If we're going to be partners in this, you should call me Lucas." Over the next few days, Eleanor regained her strength while Lucas gathered intelligence on the Blackwater Gang's movements. He taught her to shoot his spare revolver, impressed by her steady hand and quick learning. "My father believed women should know how to defend themselves," she explained, reloading the way he'd shown her. "He was progressive that way, much to my mother's dismay." Lucas leaned against a tree, watching her practice. "What brought you west? Truth now." Eleanor lowered the gun, considering her answer. "After my parents died, influenza took them both last winter. There was nothing left for me in Boston. My father's investments had failed, and the house had to be sold to cover his debts. When I received word about Uncle Jacob's bequest, it seemed like providence." "You left everything you knew to start fresh in a place you'd never seen," Lucas observed. "That takes courage or desperation," she replied with a small smile. "Perhaps both." As days turned into a week, Eleanor found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet Marshal. He was unlike any man she'd known in Boston, direct, unpolished, yet possessing a clear moral code that never wavered. He moved through the world with purpose, and when he looked at her, Eleanor felt truly seen. For his part, Lucas found himself watching Eleanor when she wasn't looking, the determined set of her jaw when she practiced shooting, the grace with which she adapted to frontier life, the intelligence behind her quick green eyes. She was stubborn and forthright, qualities that would have scandalized Boston society but served her well in the territories. Their plan took shape gradually. The Blackwaters, growing impatient when their hostage disappeared, had posted men to watch her uncle's property day and night. "They think you'll try to claim it," Lucas explained over supper one evening, "and they're right, just not in the way they expect." Eleanor leaned forward eagerly. "You have an idea. The deed is held at the land office in Tucson. We need to retrieve it legally, then use it to set a trap." His eyes gleamed with anticipation, "And I know just how to do it." The next morning, they rode into Tucson separately. Eleanor, dressed in a simple blue dress borrowed from a neighbor of Lucas's, headed for the land office while Lucas watched from across the street, alert for any sign of the Blackwaters. Inside, Eleanor presented her identification and her uncle's last letter, which mentioned her as his sole heir. "Miss Harper," the clerk said nervously, "there have been men asking about this deed, rough sorts. I should warn you I'm aware of the Blackwater Gang's interest in my property, Mr. Simmons," Eleanor interrupted calmly, "but I assure you I have protection." She glanced meaningfully toward the window where Lucas could be seen. The clerk's eyes widened in recognition. "Marshal Vance is with you? Well, that changes matters." He hurriedly processed the paperwork, handing Eleanor the deed with trembling fingers. "Be careful, Miss Harper. The Blackwaters don't take kindly to being thwarted." "Neither do I," Eleanor replied with more confidence than she felt. Outside, she crossed to where Lucas waited, slipping the deed into his coat pocket. "It's done," he nodded approvingly. "Good, now for phase 2. His hand briefly touched the small of her back as they walked, the casual contact sending warmth through her despite the tension of their situation. That evening, they enacted the next part of their plan. Lucas arranged for word to spread that Eleanor would be traveling to Phoenix the following day to register her deed with the territorial authorities, a journey that would take her through a remote stretch of road perfect for an ambush. "They'll come for you there," Lucas predicted as they prepared. "All of them, most likely. Silas won't trust his men to handle it alone, not after losing you the first time." Eleanor checked her revolver, trying to quell the fear rising in her chest. "And you're certain the sheriff's men will be in position?" Lucas nodded grimly. "Sheriff Daniels owes me a favor. His deputies will be hidden along the route, and I'll be right behind you. When the Blackwaters make their move, we'll have them surrounded." That night, neither could sleep. The tension of the coming confrontation hung heavy in the cabin. Eleanor paced by the fireplace while Lucas cleaned his weapons with methodical precision. "What if something goes wrong?" she finally asked, voicing the fear they'd both been avoiding. Lucas set aside his rifle and crossed to her. Without hesitation, he took her hands in his. "Eleanor, listen to me. I won't let anything happen to you, not again." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "This isn't just about your vendetta anymore, is it?" His thumb traced circles on her palm. "No," he admitted quietly, "it hasn't been for some time." Eleanor stepped closer, emboldened by his confession. "What is it about then?" Lucas's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "A future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine until I met you." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Eleanor responded, rising on her toes to deepen the contact, Lucas's arms encircled her, drawing her against his chest as though she belonged there. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that, not before tomorrow." Eleanor smiled, her heart racing. "Consider it motivation to ensure we both survive." Morning came too quickly. They set out as planned, Eleanor driving a small wagon along the road to Phoenix, Lucas following at a distance, hidden among the rocks and scrub brush that lined the route. The deed was concealed in a hidden pocket of her dress, while a decoy envelope sat visibly in her satchel. 3 miles outside of town, at a narrow pass between 2 ridges, it happened. 4 riders appeared ahead, blocking the road. Eleanor's hands tightened on the reins as she recognized Silas Blackwater's massive form at their center. "Miss Harper," he called, his voice deceptively pleasant, "we've been looking for you." Eleanor squared her shoulders, scanning the rocks where Lucas and the deputies should be hidden. "Mr. Blackwater, I believe your men already made your interest clear when they tied me to that post." Silas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A regrettable necessity. My boys can be overzealous." He urged his horse forward. "I've come to make you a fair offer for that spring-fed property." "More than fair, considering the circumstances." "The circumstances being that you'll kill me otherwise," Eleanor challenged, her hand inching toward her concealed revolver. A flicker of annoyance crossed Silas's face. "I prefer to conduct business amicably, but yes, one way or another, that land will be mine." Eleanor's heart pounded as the gang members spread out, effectively surrounding her wagon. "Where was Lucas? Where were the deputies?" "I have the deed right here," she said, reaching slowly for her satchel. "Perhaps we can discuss terms." Silas's expression turned triumphant as he dismounted and approached the wagon. "I knew you were a sensible woman." Just as he reached for the satchel, a shot rang out. Silas's hat flew off as a bullet grazed it. He dropped to a crouch, drawing his pistol. Ambush. One of his men shouted. Chaos erupted as deputies rose from their hiding places, rifles aimed. Lucas appeared on the ridge above, his voice carrying across the pass. Silas, Blackwater, you and your men are surrounded. Throw down your weapons. Silas snarled, grabbing Eleanor and pulling her from the wagon. She cried out as he pressed his gun to her temple. Back off, Marshal, or the lady dies right here. Lucas froze, his rifle aimed at Silas's head. Around them, gunfire had ceased as everyone recognized the standoff. Let her go, Silas, Lucas called, his voice deadly calm. It's over. Your men are outgunned. Eleanor could feel Silas's ragged breathing against her neck as he assessed their situation. 2 of his men were already on the ground, wounded or surrendering. The other was pinned behind a boulder. I still have 1 bargaining chip, Silas growled, tightening his grip on Eleanor. In that moment, Eleanor remembered Lucas's lessons. With deliberate precision, she went limp in Silas's arms, forcing him to adjust his grip. As he did, she drove her elbow hard into his ribs and twisted away, dropping to the ground. Lucas's shot came an instant later, striking Silas in the shoulder of his gun arm. The outlaw howled in pain as his weapon fell to the dirt. Before he could recover, deputies swarmed in, securing him and his remaining men. Eleanor remained on her knees, trembling with reaction until Lucas reached her side, pulling her into his arms. You did it, he murmured into her hair. You incredible woman. She clung to him, relief making her dizzy. We did it. Later, after the Blackwaters had been taken to Tuckson's jail and statements given, Lucas and Eleanor returned to his cabin. The release of tension left them both exhausted but exhilarated. Lucas built a fire while Eleanor prepared a simple meal, the domestic scene strangely peaceful after the day's violence. What happens now? Eleanor asked as they sat before the hearth, shoulders touching. Lucas took her hand, studying her fingers entwined with his. The Blackwaters will stand trial. With multiple witnesses and charges spanning 2 territories, they'll hang or spend the rest of their lives in prison. And you, is your vendetta satisfied? He considered this, the firelight playing across his features. Justice has been served. My sister can rest easier. His eyes met hers. But I find myself thinking more about the future than the past now. Eleanor's heart quickened. What future might that be? One that involves your uncle's ranch, Lucas said carefully, and perhaps a marshal who's considering settling down. He paused, suddenly uncertain. Unless you had other plans, Eleanor smiled, raising a hand to his cheek. My plan was to build a life here. I just never expected that life might include someone like you. Someone like me, Lucas echoed, leaning into her touch. Someone honorable, brave. Her smile widened. Stubborn, Lucas laughed, pulling her closer. Sounds like someone else I know. Their kiss was deeper this time, filled with promise and possibility. When they finally parted, Lucas pressed his forehead to hers. I think I started falling for you when I cut you down from that post. Your first words weren't thanks or relief, you challenged me. Eleanor smiled at the memory. You said no one owned me but you. I couldn't let that stand, even half dead from thirst. I was wrong, Lucas admitted, running his fingers through her hair. No one owns you, Eleanor Harper, but I'd very much like to stand beside you if you'll have me. 2 months later, Eleanor stood on the porch of her uncle's ranch house, now her home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. The property had flourished under her care. The spring-fed stream that had caused so much trouble now nourished a growing garden and healthy livestock. Strong arms encircled her waist from behind, and she leaned back against Lucas's chest with a contented sigh. Penny for your thoughts, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Eleanor turned in his embrace, looping her arms around his neck. I was thinking how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't ridden past that post outside Rattlesnake Gulch. Lucas's eyes darkened at the memory. I nearly didn't. I was tracking another lead that day, but something told me to take the southern route. Providence, Eleanor suggested. Or the best kind of luck, Lucas agreed, drawing her closer. Their wedding the previous month had been a simple affair in Tucson, attended by the sheriff, a few deputies, and neighbors who had become friends. Lucas had officially resigned his marshal's position, though he still occasionally consulted with the local law when needed. The Blackwater trial had concluded with Silas and his remaining men sentenced to prison. The territory felt safer, though both Eleanor and Lucas knew that the frontier would always harbor dangers. The difference was that now they faced those dangers together. "I received a letter from my parents today," Lucas said, guiding Eleanor to the porch swing. "They're considering bringing my nephew out for a visit this spring." Eleanor's face lit up. "That's wonderful. I've been hoping to meet them." She nestled against his side as they swung gently. "Do you think they'll approve of your frontier bride?" Lucas chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "They'll adore you, though my mother may be scandalized by how you came to be tied to that post in the first place." "Perhaps we'll soften that part of the story," Eleanor suggested with a laugh. "And miss telling how the proper Boston lady outshot half the men in the territory during the Blackwater ambush," Lucas teased. "Not a chance." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, planning their future in quiet conversation. They would expand the ranch, perhaps build a larger house as their family grew. Lucas spoke of raising horses alongside the cattle, while Eleanor described the orchard she envisioned near the spring. When stars filled the sky, Lucas pulled Eleanor to her feet and into his arms for a dance without music, their bodies swaying in perfect harmony. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Coming west, all you endured." Eleanor looked up at the man who had become her world, her protector, partner, and love. The man who had cut her free when she was bound, who had seen her strength when others saw only vulnerability. "Not for a moment," she answered truthfully. "Every step, every hardship led me here to this place." "To you?" Lucas's kiss was tender, a promise renewed. "No one owns you," he whispered against her lips, "but you own my heart completely." Eleanor smiled, remembering the proud, angry young woman tied to that post and the journey that had transformed them both. "And you own mine, Lucas Vance." "By choice, not by claim, that makes all the difference." Hand in hand, they walked into their home as the first cool breeze of evening swept across the land that had brought them together, land that would sustain the future they were building. One day at a time, in this wild and beautiful territory they both now called home.